Well, while it's still up, I want to draw your attention to an image on the By Any Means Necessary Facebook page. Yep, still there. The profile picture is a rear shot of Sean A. Blackman, leather jacket and backpack on, hoodie down, holding a microphone out to the crowd of people at one of the many Answer Coalition actions he's been involved in. Sean is in that moment doing one of the things I believe he does best, that old school call and response engagement with the people in the streets, using his deep, rich voice, the one y'all love, to bellow out a chant about stopping war. From the signs in the image, the war at that time was the one in Iraq, and giving the crowd the mic to respond in kind, which you can see that some in the crowd enthusiastically were. But I don't mean that Sean only does this thing at protest the best. No, you hear him at what I think is his best also every day here on By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik. But make no mistake that what you hear from Sean on this show every day is the same thing you will hear from him in the streets. It's the same thing you will hear from him on a panel discussion. If you rap with the brother one-on-one, you'd hear the same thing. And what I say on this show is the same as what I say in the Black Alliance for Peace and Pan-African Community Action, on Lukman Nation on Black Power Media, and even in my church, Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ, although I'm in a little bit of trouble with a few church members who feel like I unjustly and blanketly condemn the Democratic Party all the time. But no matter where you encounter me, you will hear me say the exact same things that I say here. So when you listen to us here on By Any Means Necessary, we aren't saying anything that we're being compelled to say by the people who fund this network. We don't need Vladimir Putin to give us an approved script to talk about racism, sexism, classism, exploitation, oppression, and imperialism. Sean and I have been doing that before we had this job. And should the fascists in this country shut Sputnik down like they did RT America, we'll continue to say these things. You will also not find a compilation of all the different show hosts on Sputnik News saying the exact same thing about any topic, let alone this US, EU, NATO manufactured conflict in Ukraine. But you can find compilations of news anchors across the major media platforms and even the local affiliate stations in this country parroting the exact same line about any number of topics. And that's because the State Department approved their script. The Kremlin don't control nothing over here. But already, our shows have been removed from podcast platforms like Spreaker, which fed to Spotify, Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher. We moved to Podbean, and our shows were removed from there. We moved to Simplecast, and we were removed from there. Through all of this, our YouTube channel was still up, but as of last night, it's no longer on YouTube in this country. So far, our Facebook and Twitter pages are still up, but we're knocking on wood for those. If this US, EU, NATO proxy war using Ukraine against Russia continues, more platforms like ours that are not so-called Russian state-sponsored media will also be removed from social media platforms for merely posting content that negates the narrative approved by the State Department, which is broadcast every day, all day, by the State Department-sponsored media outlets, CNN, MSNBC, PBS, NBR, and I'll even throw in Fox News, because it's true. They're not different or better or honestly worse on imperialist propaganda just because they're also right-wing lunatics. And where will people be then? What will people say in response? What will people do? I can't help but remember the conversations about Joe Rogan and people calling to censor him because of his homophobia, transphobia, racism, misogyny, and the people who equated valid critique of his comments with calls to deplatform him. From those conversations alone, I know that a lot of people won't say much or do much. I also can't help but remember all the endless and exasperating conversations with white leftists over their dismissal of racism so they could get their numbers up to push for Medicare for all, because even the alt-right fascists wanted Medicare for all, But now that the State Department-sponsored media in the West is lying to you about the fascists in Ukraine, some of those same Red-Brown Alliance horseshoe theory folks are going right along with the imperialist narrative about this war, or are strangely silent about the fascists in the U.S. and the Ukraine that have been shown to be connected. As more of us are censored, I don't expect a whole lot of support from the latte left, as my beloved Abdus used to call them. What I do expect is more repression, because resistance breeds repression, but repression breeds resistance. So do not expect Sean and myself to be silent. You may have a hard time finding us on some conventional social media outlets throughout this conflict, but we will still resist this fascist, capitalist, white supremacist, patriarchal, imperialist empire with the tools we have been given to do that with: our analysis and our voices. As much as I hate to see my comrades and colleagues here at Sputnik and at RT America and in other places and on other platforms who've been censored endure this, it has been instructive in learning the difference between allies and accomplices and comrades and collaborators. I pray for an end to this madness that the US, EU, NATO started. And while I'm praying, I will fight. Whether it is a week from now, a month from now, a year, or a decade, the truth will ultimately win. I believe that. In the meantime, friends, a luta continua. The struggle continues. Victoria ascertina. Victory is certain. Forward ever, backward never, by any means necessary. Follow Lukman Nation on patreon.com for all that good stuff.